Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. Mary Payton with All About STEM Radio. I come to you here every Monday from 7 to 8 p.m. Central Time on Fishbowl Radio Network from the Globe Life Park in Arlington. Although the station is there, I am still on the big island of Hawaii for a few more months and still enjoying it and loving it, although we've had quite a bit of rain, but that's why it's so beautiful here. I want to continue to give a big thanks to all of my teachers working to keep our kids educated. I know I am having a blast. If you have ever taught STEM online, this week I was able to finish up our module on HTML. Now we're getting ready to use a new STEM writing program called Elementary, and I'm excited about that. We're going to start that tomorrow. And don't forget, because we can't travel right now, I still have my Taylor STEM Adventures books available. Taylor STEM Adventures Texas and Taylor STEM Adventures Hawaii. So, without any further ado, hey y'all, I have yet another outstanding guest on my show. I know I say this every week, but that's okay. I can say it every week. It's my show. I love it. Erin was on the show about a year or so ago. It may have been more than a year ago. And she has come out with a new book that we have talked about. And it's called Capturing Cows, Farts, and Burps, which you know kids are going to eat that book up because they're going to want to know farts and burps or burps and farts, cows. Okay, what happens? And, as we all know, cows are vegetarian. So they got to have a lot of gas. But before we get into that, I want Erin to introduce herself. Erin, would you tell my audience who you are and a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me, Dr. Payton. I'm excited to be back talking with you about STEM, and I know that the school year has kicked off for many teachers and students, and they're doing some things virtually and some things in the classroom. So I hope that my book, this is my latest book, Capturing Cow Farts and Burps, will hopefully give everyone a little laugh in these new and interesting times. And I write nonfiction books. This is my fifth book, actually, that will be out. It's actually out right now. You can find it on Amazon and elsewhere, and will be available for you to order and kind of get kids thinking about climate change, the environment, and getting them hooked by talking about farts and burps. So I'm hoping to share some great resources with you today. I have an education background, so all of my books are nonfiction and a fun, engaging way, not just to engage kids in the classroom, but even for parents and families at home.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked about your books before, and I think you sent me a couple electronically. I love how your books are laid out, because we're going to talk about your latest one in just a moment. But I love how your books are laid out. They're not only, educational and entertaining, they also have activities that parents, teachers, and kids can do. But, one of your books, excuse me, let me back up. How did you get interested in writing environmentally conscious books?
So that goes back to 2015 when I kind of started this journey, and I was working mainly with teachers at Department of Energy, focused on how could we get teachers thinking about energy literacy. What is energy? What are energy sources? And primarily I was working with teachers, and I had the opportunity to collaborate with Joshua Snyderman, who's a co-author on some of my books, to write a book directed at kids. And so I thought, oh, this could be really interesting because my background was primarily working at the teacher level. So what would it look like from the ground up? And how do you explain these environmentally friendly concepts to a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old? And how can you do it in a way that's not scary, right? When climate change first came out into classrooms and schools, right, there was a lot of doom and gloom, right? Polar bears are dying. They have nowhere to live, right? Penguins. For children, that can be very anxiety-inducing, right, and scary, and also make people feel like what they do doesn't matter, right, because it's such a big global problem. So when we started to write the environmental book, we really wanted kids to feel like they could be part of the solution, that their actions mattered and that they do matter, right? Currently speaking, and engage them in a way that was going to make the content relevant to their life, right? How many kids could say, oh, I've seen a polar bear? Well, maybe at the zoo they've seen a polar bear or a penguin. But, using topics and connections like burps and farts is a great way to get kids actually learning about some of these concepts in science that are a little bit challenging sometimes for kids to imagine because you can't see a gas or you might not be able to smell a greenhouse gas, for example. So we wanted to, use examples that would spark that kind of curiosity and question asking in kids. And I think the most interesting thing that we found, though, is that adults love the books as well. And the reason why is that they don't know all the facts, right? So if we think about how we teach children, right, sometimes it's from the top down. And so that assumes that someone has knowledge, right? And if you don't have that knowledge to share, you're not going to share it. So what a great opportunity for both kids and parents to learn some really interesting facts and then go and do research after. I've had parents who've said, I couldn't believe that humans really fart 20 times in a day. Like, I had to go and research that and figure out why we fart 20 times a day, right? So it's an interesting approach, I think, not only for kids, but to get adults thinking and asking the right questions as well.
And, all of that is so true and so interesting because me being a STEM educator, I've spent several years teaching science. And we have to teach human environmental impact. But what we teach is so small and making it totally relevant to the kids. And see, I'm from Texas. And in Texas, we have an enormous amount of cows. We have an enormous amount of oil industry. We have a lot of people. We have, the gas industry. And, we talk about it very, very, very generally. And, in looking at your books, it's not that you talk about it specifically, but you make it extremely relatable to the kids. Instead of making this big, broad thing, you make it, oh, wait a minute. Okay, people burp, people fart. What makes why does that happen, and what effect does that have on our environment? And that's what I've loved about your books. And so, but tell me about a couple of your other books before we get into why cows burp and fart.
Sure. So the first book was Climate Change, Discover How It Impacts Spaceship Earth. Then I've got a book on Renewable Energy Olympics, which is called Renewable Energy, Discover the Fuel of the Future, right? So hand in hand with climate change is this whole concept of energy, which if you think about it, and even if you ask an adult, where does your electricity come from? How does it get into your house? Right? What are those energy sources that are powering our world, right? Those are really abstract concepts because for many of us, we just flip on a switch and we don't think about that energy use, right? So we really wanted to tie in how can we think about our energy use and how do we make it relevant to kids? And kids love the fact that if they go to the gas station their car actually might be getting filled up with a little bit of corn, right? Ethanol. That's an easy gas that is usually 10% mixed in with other gas, and it's coming from corn. And kids get super excited that we could put corn into a car, right? Or French fries, right? Using all sorts of things. So that renewable energy book is to kind of connect back with climate change on what are those energy sources and what are fossil fuels and what are renewable energy. Then we've got a Everyday Superheroes, Women in STEM Careers.
Oh yeah, I love that book.
This is a great book if you're looking for innovative ways to talk about careers beyond just an engineer, an astronomer. We have sustainable fashion designers. We have 3D designers. We have microbiologists. And we feature all women, and there are 26 of them from the A to Z of careers. And they're all women except for 2 who are currently doing this work. So we really wanted the women to represent not only diverse fields, but diverse in terms of their background, their education, their pathway, and we wanted them to be current. I've got women in there who are young PhDs, like a geologist, Dr. Fairfan, to women who have been in their industry for years. So that book is a great way to kind of get teachers and students and even parents and kids excited about all the different options in STEM careers. And then we did an update kind of to our climate change book. And we really actually changed from an illustration approach. So those first 3 books I mentioned are all illustrated books with a lot of content. They're like about 100 pages. We changed to using photography. So real images of Earth, real images of, thermometers and the tools that we use. And that book is also out on Amazon. So all of my books are available on Amazon or bookshop.org. If you haven't heard of bookshop.org, this is a new way to support bookstores that are local. Have you heard of this, Dr. Payton?
No, I'm writing it down right now.
Yeah, so bookshop.org is basically an equivalent to an Amazon, but when you order a book, it actually looks where the book is being shipped, and it says, is there a local bookstore that carries that book? So it purchases the book from that local bookstore, and then that local bookstore can deliver it to you. So it's a great way to kind of support local causes. They have massive amounts of titles every day. They're adding more and more titles. So bookshop.org is another great way if you want to support local and get your book.
Okay. Hey, that's something new, and I've written it down. I'm gonna have to look into that because of my books. But I want to go back into a comment that you just made about the photography that you're using now as opposed to illustrations. That is a great idea because I went the other way. I had photography made into illustrations, and my illustrator was like, these are actual places. I said, yeah, these are actual things and places that my children and I went to. But, going back to the books, you're making things relevant and understandable, not only to the kids, but also to the parents. Because right now we have time, and the teachers, we have time to think about what is actually going on. Because one of the things here in Hawaii that I'm starting to notice is the air is a little bit clearer. But when I first got here and when I lived here before, the heat, it wasn't as hot here. And like today, I've had to start wearing a lot of sunscreen because I'm starting to tan a lot. And then one of the things that's also happening here, we're starting to have a lot of sharks coming closer to the beaches. So if you're looking, I mean, not that they're necessarily going to bite you, but we've had quite a few environmental changes with sharks coming closer in to the beach. You'll see where people are swimming and sharks are right there with them. And our turtles are, a lot more of them are coming on shore to lay their eggs. So the climate is having some changes based on the situation that we have going on right now. Uh, to include what you mentioned in your books, and I like the fact that you kind of take the fear out of it for everybody, every age, from children all the way up to grandparents. And so it makes for a very comforting and comfortable discussion that you can have. And was that one of the things that you kind of wanted to portray with your publications, is opening those lines of conversation?
Yes, I think that's so important. I think you summed it up so well, right? I think with climate change in particular, and how we use energy and where we get our energy from, many of us feel like at an individual level, we can't really make an impact, right? That some of these decisions might be above us. And it's really important that we see that at all levels, we're a community and that we can make a difference. And one of the first things that you can do to make a difference is to have some knowledge and understand the science behind what's happening and be able to ask questions and think about who's tackling these problems and what are the solutions that we're coming up with to be able to address things like climate change, right? So in this book, Capturing Cow Fart, I really wanted to focus on methane, because it's kind of common knowledge that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, and we're producing more of that from our transportation to our consumption all around the world. But methane is a gas that is actually a little bit more potent. It's a warming gas as well. And so I wanted people to think about, well, what are we doing to address other greenhouse gases? And we don't have the answer yet. But that's the great thing about science is always happening around us. It's not static. We don't just figure out a solution and then move on. It's constantly evolving and changing, and we're working together. So I wanted to kind of feature who are the people and what are the solutions, like you mentioned, so that the conversation about these big topics could be brought up in a way that would engage, generations.
And I like that. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, this is Dr. Mary Payton with All About STEM Radio. I come to you every Monday from 7 to 8 p.m. Central Time here on Fishbowl Radio Network from Globe Life Park, Arlington. And today's guest, Erin, she is a author of children's books on not environmental impact, but we're today talking about her new book that just came out in, was it August or September?
September 1, it just came out.
It came out September 1st, called Capturing Cows, Farts, and Burps. Now, Erin, you just mentioned methane, the gas. Now, let's go back just a little bit. One of the questions that I read on your one of your web pages said, "How many cows live on Earth?"
Yes.
So I'm in Hawaii.
Do you have an answer for me, Dr. Payton? I would love to know. I would love to know what your thoughts are.
Oh, God. We're talking thousands or maybe even millions. Because if you look, okay, I'm here in Hawaii, and on this island, they have big cattle ranches because this is the largest island. And if you have not had Hawaiian beef, oh my goodness, y'all have missed it, although it's expensive, but I still love it. And being from Texas, going anywhere in Texas, you're going to see huge cattle farms, and I've got friends who have huge cattle farms or ranches. I'm sorry, I can't say farms because cows are ranched, not farmed. And but then you talk about Wyoming, and then all over the world. In Germany, I've seen cattle ranches, and then you've got dairy farms and just all kinds of things. So I'm going to say thousands and thousands of them. Am I even close?
So there are actually, which is a mind-blowing number, and I usually give people a visual of this number. There are 1.5 billion with a B, cows on Earth. Mm-hmm. That is a huge number of cows. And if you think about it, cows, we use them for their dairy, for their meat, but there are lots of parts of the world where we use cows just to haul goods or to move things, or they just live freely, right? So our demand for cows has just increased. And cows are a really interesting creature because their diet mainly consists of grass and plant food. So because of that, they create a lot of methane through their digestion process. And actually, we, even as humans, we produce a little methane as a byproduct. So methane is a byproduct of the digestive process. But because there are 1.5 billion cows, they're burping and farting a lot every single day. Can you give me a guess on how much methane do you think a cow burps in a year?
I have no idea because they're eating plant material all the time. So, if most of us eat too much salad, we become, or too many beans or too much roughage, which is totally good for us, we become a little gassy is what we call it. So I have no idea.
Right. So cows, it is an important thing to note here is most of the methane from a cow is actually coming from their burps, not their farts. And that's just due to the digestion process because cows actually swallow their food whole and then they spit it back up into their mouth, which we call cud, and then they chew it again. And then they swallow it again. So most of the methane is actually coming from their burps. And they, on average, one cow will release 350 pounds of methane each year, every year. So that's a lot of methane that all of these cows are burping and farting. And we actually, as scientists and as a community, we underestimated the amount of greenhouse gases coming from agriculture as a whole. And so some scientists wanted to kind of parcel out, okay, is it coming from our growing of crops? Is it coming from different types of animals? So there's been this new emerging kind of research on cows in particular and other ruminant animals and what methane they produce and how we could figure out to either capture that methane or could we make cows less gassy. And I bet you already know a way, Dr. Payton, that we are actually capturing methane from something else that a cow produces. Do you have an idea what that might be?
See, you're
something
putting me...
stinky.
The manure?
Yes. Yes. Huh? Yes.
Really?
Yes. So one of the things that most people don't know that we actually do right now is we take cow manure and we put it in a methane digester. So we actually parcel out the methane from the cow poop. And then we can create two things from that. We can create a biogas and we can create a solid portion. And we use that to create heat and electricity from the gas. and we use the solid for fertilizer on farms. So we're actually using methane right now. And I want kids to think about, and even listeners right now, how they would capture methane, because methane is a really interesting gas. We cannot see it, we cannot taste it, and we cannot smell it. So how on earth would we capture a gas like this?
So I don't know if we can capture it directly from the air, but when you look at dairy farming, it should not be hard to muzzle and capture. But
right. And we do that. So what scientists are actually doing, so the greatest part about that question, right, is you can imagine a group full of kids. If you ask them, how do you capture a gas you can't see, you can't taste, you can't smell? Light bulbs go off in that room, right? They start thinking about the tools, the equipment, where a cow lives, how they could catch it, right? I mean, the conversations that kids will have, or even parents, is pretty interesting and also amazing to see some of their ideas. And you're right, Dr. Payton, they're actually developing a muzzle almost that is featured in my book to capture the burp of the cow, and then it actually breaks down the methane into carbon dioxide and water. So that's one technology that they're working on. And then today I just read about, and it's not in my book because, as I said, science is always evolving. There's a new backpack that they're trying to put on cows. So somebody's invented a little backpack that the cow wears to be able to capture the fart and the burp with kind of like a little straw that goes into their mouth. So there's fascinating things and solutions that people are trying to figure out with this methane. And they're also looking at, as I mentioned, cows eat plants, and that's why they're producing all this methane. Do you have any idea about what kinds of foods we could feed a cow to reduce the amount of methane that they would release?
Let me think. Probably foods that have some sort of carbohydrate in it that would absorb some of the stomach acid. Y'all, she's throwing these questions out to me, and I'm guessing because I have not read the book. I'm gonna let y'all know that right now. I'm guessing. So
and that's
I'm
what
not
we
sure,
want.
but I'm gonna give you an answer. I'm like a kid. Huh?
Yeah. I said that's what we want, though, right? I want your imagination and your curiosity to get sparked, and I want you to be able to make those connections just like a kid would, right? Oh, what could they eat, right? Carbohydrates. I love that. So cows, actually, we're giving them different types of foods like garlic. Garlic is actually one of the things that if you eat more garlic, you will release less methane. We're feeding them seaweed. Seaweed is also a food in which the cows are releasing less methane if they have some seaweed in their diet. And then curry. So most kids go, Miss Erin, what's curry? I don't know, right? Or they might not be familiar with the three types of curry, that are common: red, yellow, and green. Yeah. And so scientists are experimenting with all these different types of foods and adding it to a cow's diet to see how much methane they release after eating all these different foods.
Interesting.
And they get to do this with a pretty cool tool that most kids like, right? Because a lot of kids go, well, Miss Erin, if you can't see and you can't smell the gas, how do they know how much gas is being released? How do scientists and farmers and engineers actually collaborate to figure out these solutions? Well, they've invented something called a methane laser detector. And so it's exactly like any kid would imagine. It looks like a little toy, and it has a laser pointer on it, and it can tell you where the gas is. So it kind of gives an infrared, and it also tells you how fast the gas is moving. So then scientists can actually measure all of that gas that cows might be releasing, and they're able to kind of track that data together. So everyone on the radio, I know I put Dr. Payton on the spot, but that's the goal of these books. Yeah, that's the goal of these books, is to get kids and people just thinking about these questions and these connections that can be made, and knowing that one answer might not be the full solution, because capturing cow farts and burps, this is new technology. These are new inventions, and these are people that are just working on this problem right now as we speak, and trying to figure out how to make our world a better place.
Now, I'm going to go back to one of your previous books, Everyday Superheroes, Women in STEM. Let's take that to what type of scientists are actually looking at methane given off by cows in their farts and their burps. What type of scientists are looking at that? Who are these people? Because that's one question that I get asked to me a lot lately, is what type of jobs or new jobs are out there in science related to things that are going on? So who's looking at this?
Yeah, so there are scientists that are called atmospheric scientists. So the word atmospheric has the word atmosphere, right? They study our atmosphere and the mixture of gases in our atmosphere. So these are scientists who kind of look at the overall trends and say, where is the mixture of gases coming from, and what are those gases? So atmospheric scientists, they figure out, that methane is a greenhouse gas, and where is this methane coming from? Then there are scientists that actually work with chemicals, etc. So sometimes we call them chemists. So we have a lot of scientists that are chemists. We also have some nutritionists, right? But those that particularly work with farm animals that are working on this, and engineers. There are different types of engineers that are trying to figure out how to actually make those inventions that I mentioned. So that's a really good question, Dr. Payton, of how do we get specific with kids and go beyond just scientists and engineers. So when I share some links and resources with you, I will make a list of those specific types of scientists and engineers. And then that way, if there's listeners and educators that want to dig a little bit deeper, they can do that.
And I'm asking that question because I get asked that question quite a bit lately, because, like with your book, Everyday Superheroes, you're looking at what are the jobs out there. And I know sometimes people say, well, how does that person relate to STEM that you had on your show? And I start to explain, and they're like, oh, really? But we're talking today about something in agriculture, in farming. We're talking about animals. And you just mentioned a STEM career that I had totally not miscounted, but totally did not put together with the farming, the ranching, the cattle industry, which was atmospheric scientists. Because when I think of atmospheric scientists, I think of people who are dealing with the various levels of our atmosphere and the changes, the thinning in the ozone and things like that. I don't necessarily think of them looking at the different chemicals or the different gases and the rise and falls in the different gases in our atmosphere. And I should be totally ashamed of myself for saying that. But making the connection between those people was something that I had not done till you just mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
That is
right.
so.
And so
No, go ahead
it's so
on.
important for us just to make those connections, right? And oftentimes kids know about zoologists, but a scientist who wants to work with farm animals, oftentimes they're just called an animal scientist. Not a big fancy name, right? But somebody who wants to study specific animals that we've domesticated, an animal scientist. So sometimes we overthink, I think, some of these inventions and technologies, right? And we say, oh, wow, what is this? It must be something we don't know. And then like you just mentioned, it's like, oh, wait, we made this connection between, our atmosphere and greenhouse gases, and then our understanding of how cows are impacting our atmosphere. And that's what we want to happen with any reader.
Yeah, because we always talk about how transportation, how industry, how humans impact it, but we don't necessarily talk about how, cows and sheep and goats and horses and all of that impact our environment. So I'm finding all this very interesting, extremely. Now, if someone wanted to purchase your books, where would they go? Or do you have a website that tells us more about you, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so if you want to see some of my kid-friendly resources and learn about all of my books, I do have a website. It's erinedu.org, and we'll make sure that link becomes available, and that lists all my books. And I generally do like hands-on school encounters and visits. With COVID, I am on a little bit of a hiatus. I'm actually now in Huntsville, Alabama, and school just started back up. So I'm just kind of trying to wait out this year and see what happens. But my books are also available on Amazon. If you search my name, Erin Twamley, the books will pop up. And I also shared a resource that some listeners may not know about. It's called bookshop.org. And it's a way to buy books locally. They still get shipped to your house, but the website searches for a local bookstore that might carry that book and buys it from that local bookstore. So check out bookshop.org if you haven't and want to support a local bookstore.
Okay. Yeah. So you've been doing this for a while, and I love the fact that you not only come from an education background, but you've worked hard to work with working with the Department of Energy to make teachers and students and us lay people aware of energy and how we affect it, and how other organisms such as farm animals and things like that affect it. But you made comment earlier that we really don't think of where our electricity comes from. We don't think of how we're impacting our own environment. And that's one of the things that I've loved about your previous publications, because I don't have this one yet, is that it talks about those things, but it talks about it in a way that is not frightening. It talks about it in a way that makes connections. And it talks about it in such a way that opens those lines of communication between the generations, between the parents and the kids. You are a major resource to all of us about energy and the environment. What do you think you're going to look at next? Because wait a minute, you have a new little one, right?
I do. I have a son. He's just about a year old now, and I have a toddler who's 3. So this last year I've really spent on capturing cow farts and burps. And I call myself a research scientist, right? I'm always researching the new and upcoming, what's happening next in science, and where can I go? And I have some ideas of where I want to go. I'm actually specifically looking. I've gotten some requests to make some more STEM career books, but that are a little bit more focused. So focusing on a book, for example, of women in energy or women in engineering. And I really like the idea or the challenge, because I often get this question, what's the difference between an engineer and a scientist? In the STEM world, we often throw those two terms around all of the time to kids.
Yes,
that's a scientist, that's an engineer, right? And we assume that people know the difference. And what I found is that most kids, and even teachers sometimes, struggle with how to explain that to kids. So the reason I kind of am thinking about, could I do a book, something about, scientists versus engineers, or a book just featuring all the different types of engineers, since there's, over 36 classifications of engineers, so that people could really understand what an engineer does and all the different types. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about now. And I often do my writing in terms of kind of what problem do I want to solve. And so this problem that I'm kind of researching and trying to figure out right now is, how do I explain to somebody the difference between an engineer and a scientist? And so I think you'll probably see one of my next books on that topic. And I don't know the hook yet, right? I always have to have my hook, but I'm sure I will be figuring that out as I research and continue to draft my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. But I love the concept, because, and don't anybody steal it. I love the concept because you are so right. Because when we teach in school, we always tell kids to think like a scientist. When we teach in our science classes, biology classes, science from 3rd grade and up. But when we get to physics, and I love my physics teachers because I have taught physics, I've taught chemistry, all of that. We don't tell kids to think like an engineer. Now, I do have friends who do say stuff like that, but you don't see it printed in books. Think like an engineer. But when you take biology or you take science from grades 3 through 8, the first thing they have in there is think like a scientist. And we are just now really looking at engineering, because when you teach engineering or you teach STEM, you teach the engineering design process, and it's adjusting the mindset of our kids. And how many kids have told me, oh, I want to be an engineer? And I asked them, well, what type of engineer you want to be? Oh, just an engineer. And people have heard me say that all the time. And like you say, there are over 30 different facets of engineering. And new ones are coming up every year, because how we live is changing. So that's going to be interesting. That's going to be 2 or 3 books right there. It's not going to be just one.
Yes, definitely. That's part of the challenge of writing is really distilling down to what's the concept that I really want to teach kids. or teach my readers, right? And help them figure out. So that's, what I'm working on, scientists versus engineers, and, engineers and figuring that out. It's always fun because, like you said, there's always new technologies, new inventions, new careers, new people, new resources that I'm learning about, and great organizations that are doing all this different STEM work. So it's fantastic.
And the other thing, I'm going back to capturing cows' farts and burps, and I'm looking at this, and this whole book is all of your books are major collaborations between scientists and engineers and physicists. These are collaborations. It's like people are not working in vacuums. The different fields are coming together to solve these problems or to look at these problems.
Yes, and I love that because sometimes kids are super interested in, let's say, the fart aspect, right? And what is a fart and what does it look like and how do I capture it? And then I have other kids who say, well, I'm not really interested in the fart, but I'm interested in what kind of tool or equipment could capture the fart, right? And what does that look like? And so it just shows kids, right, that there's many ways and many careers that are being used to solve the same problem. And people look at the same problem differently and focus on different aspects of that problem. And that's how we solve it, right? Working together, including farmers, right? Let's not leave out the farmers who are also, right, working with scientists and trying to figure out, well, if I did feed my cows something else, right, fed them corn, fed them garlic, how does that impact my earth? So collaboration, I think, is a key word, and I think most STEM educators are always trying to get kids to collaborate, right? That's what STEM is all about, that collaboration and integration. So capturing cow farts is just kind of one problem to give kids, and you can see by the questions they ask and if you let them engage in conversation that they're all looking at this problem in very different ways and coming up with different solutions and questions to move us forward.
And this is something that is one of the biggest reasons I like STEM. I love science, I love chemistry, I love biology, and I'm starting to get that love for STEM because in biology or chemistry or physics, you're working in your own little vacuums. But in STEM, because you have people that have backgrounds in science, you have people that are very familiar with technology or engineering or mathematics, and you can bring kid teams together in STEM for that collaboration. And that's why I love STEM books, I love STEM authors, I love writing about STEM, because it is that collaboration and that understanding and the ability to view things in not so much a broader way, but a more communicative way to solve problems or actual problems. And that's just my take and my think on things. But
yeah, I love that. I think it's an important reminder, especially because kids oftentimes think, well, adults have all the problems figured out, right? Because, we want them to think sometimes that adults have it all figured out. But science is the area that shows that, hey, we're all learning and we're all learning together, and we're trying to make a world where we can all live, right? And a green planet, a sustainable planet. And there are lots of problems to solve, but if we work together, we can do it.
Yeah, because I'm starting to look at more and more of what some of our children are doing in connection with working with adults, and I'm seeing things all the way down to middle school kids here on the island that have worked with university professors on some of the atmospheric things here. And I'm like, ooh, that's a middle school kid. Wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
So, they've got to
Yeah,
learn that they can be part of a solution.
exactly. We have to engage our young generation, and they have ideas, and they look at the problems differently, and they experience the problems differently, right? Than many of us. So capturing cow farts, I think, is a great silly way to get kids engaged or readers engaged. I will say I've had lots of parents and adults who are like curious too. They're like, what is this, right? And it's a silly way to engage people in broad science concepts. And then the goal is that you can dig deeper. You can dig into, okay, what are the STEM careers for somebody who would capture a cow fart? Or, oh, let's look at the digestive process of cows. Why do they produce methane? What is a byproduct, right? You could go down the whole digestion of the cows. You can go into greenhouse gases. You can go into the atmosphere. You can go into technologies like a methane digester, where I talked about cow poop that we're able to turn into biogas and solids, right? There's so many different avenues in which you can take this book, read it, and say, this is what I'm interested in, or this is what I want to learn more about, and then take that curiosity and go and learn more.
Now, we have about a minute left. Is there any favorite part of capturing cows' burps and farts that you particularly lean toward?
So what I love is that you can feed a cow different types of curry, and I'm really curious if a cow has a favorite type of curry. If a cow likes red, green, or yellow, right? Because they all taste different. And I wonder if a cow has any sense of what kind of curry they would like. And so that's a lingering question, right? Like, could somebody go and study that? Of course they could. And so that's kind of a silly part for me, but a question that proves to me that science is constant and that we're always trying to understand and learn more.
Well, hey, I love that, because see, now you've left me with a lot to think about, Erin, and trust me, I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to start following anyone who's feeding cows curry. I'm going to start looking for research on that.
Yeah.
You have been a great guest. And what is your website again so people can find you?
Yeah, erinedu.org is the best way to find me. I'm a nonfiction STEM author, and my name is Erin Twamley.
Okay. Well, hey, Erin, I want you to enjoy now that you're in Alabama. And if you're looking for places to go and things to do, I lived there for years because I was stationed at Fort McClellan before it closed. And then I taught at Jack State. So if you're looking for places to go and things to do, let me know, because that area is like just amazing, especially when you have young kids, because my kids were young like that when we were there. So drop me an email. You've got my number. Give me a call. And thank you again for coming on to the show. Ladies and gentlemen, I am thanking Miss Erin Twamley. She is a STEM educator, STEM author. Her most recent book that came out last month is Collecting Cows' Burps and Farts. And it talks about cows giving off methane gas and how it affects us, but in a kid-friendly, family-oriented, interesting way to open up those questions.